So if you aren't aware of what's going on right now, Chris Paul was recently, like in the middle of the night, just let go from the Clippers. It didn't say he was waived. It didn't say he was cut. It didn't say anything like that. It said he was, quote, sent home from the Los Angeles Clippers. And to me, that just sounds so much worse than just saying he got cut or waived, because it's like the term sent home, the implications are that he did something to warrant getting waived, I guess, right? And to me, this is so disrespectful from the Los Angeles Clippers front office, because Chris Paul is literally the best player in the franchise's history. I don't care about anything that happened before they moved to Los Angeles, even though they had some good players back in like the 90s and even going back to the 70s when they had like Bob McAdoo and stuff. As far as the modern era and the most impactful star player that has ever played for the Clippers, you can't tell me anybody better than Chris Paul and anybody more impactful than Chris Paul. Chris Paul is the best player in this franchise's history. He's led them to multiple winning seasons, multiple playoff runs, the most success in a single stretch, like a 5-6 seasons in any stretch in Clippers history. Before Chris Paul even got there, mind you, the Clippers were irrelevant. They drafted Blake Griffin in 2009. He misses a whole year. His first year is with Chris Paul, and he ends up developing and becoming a star player. And under Chris Paul's leadership, the Clippers had some of their most successful seasons in the franchise history. They made it to the second round a few times. They never made it to a conference finals, but that was because the Western Conference in the early 2010s was a bloodbath. You had teams like the Spurs, OKC, the grit and grind Memphis Grizzlies. Those are like the main teams that would constantly make deep postseason runs. And then you had other teams like the Portland Trail Blazers, the Houston Rockets, and the infancy of the Golden State Warriors dynasty starting around that same time, like 2012 to 2014. So the Clippers never really found their way or their footing in the Western Conference around that time. Also, not to mention, they just never got lucky. Either injuries were their complete downfall, or, Chris Paul's teammates just didn't show up. And there's this constant narrative about Chris Paul that he was a playoff underperformer or a choker or things like that. Just look at the box scores of those series, or even just watch some of those games back. Chris Paul was never the problem with the team. So Chris Paul getting treated like this because he had a little bit of criticism for the coaching staff or the front office or whatever the case may be is hilarious to me, because the Clippers suck right now. They're arguably the worst team that's trying. Like, there are 5 teams in the NBA currently that are shamelessly tanking, and then you have the Clippers who are actually trying to win games that are like 5-18 or something like that. And now the Clippers are in a situation where they are being led by a 36-year-old James Harden. Their supposed third option, Bradley Beal, is out with a hip injury, and he, despite him having an injury and being out for the rest of the year, he wasn't even playing that good anyway. He was averaging like 9 points on 30% from the field. He was playing awful. And I know Chris Paul himself wasn't playing great in the minutes that he was playing. He got a few coaches' decisions, DNPs, but like at the end of the day, the guy is 40 years old. Like, Chris Paul tried to extend his career a little bit post OKC. Like, after the Houston years, you knew that Chris Paul at the end of it was going to start regressing, but he was able to stretch his career out maybe an extra 2 or 3 years with Phoenix and with the Oklahoma City Thunder, and being a good floor raiser for those teams, especially OKC, where he was able to lead them to a playoffs, despite that team only being having a 0.7% chance of making the playoffs that year in a very, very stacked Western Conference, mind you. Like, that was a year where it was LeBron and AD, Russ and Harden. That was when Luka started winning more games. That was around the time where the Utah Jazz were still competitive in the West. And if I'm not mistaken, OKC was a 4 seed that year. Like, they just had a bunch of unproven guys, and then they had Chris Paul there. The way that the Clippers treated CP3 in this situation is just inexcusable. First of all, the Clippers have not only been bad this year, but they have been disappointing every single year since the Kawhi era started. We all know what went down with the Kawhi trade and the PG trade and how they let PG walk in free agency. But I think the worst thing about this whole situation is the fact that the Clippers have some of the worst track records in terms of their trades and in terms of just how they operate as an organization. And when you look at the Clippers, you always knew that they were second fiddle. You always knew that they were the inferior team in Los Angeles. They were never really taken seriously. And guess who was the guy that kind of put the Clippers on the map for a few years? CP3. CP3 led this team to consistent playoff runs. He kept this team relevant. Lob City was their moniker, and it was one of the most popular teams in the NBA besides like Miami and New York and, you know, all the popular teams with popular players. CP3 organically made this team somewhat relevant. And the funniest thing about them getting CP3 is that they weren't even the first choice. They weren't even the first option for CP3. Originally, he was supposed to go to the Lakers in that infamous trade that got blocked by the NBA. So even in that, the Clippers weren't the more desirable option for CP3. Then you look at the Kawhi situation. Kawhi didn't even really want to go to the Clippers at first, right? Like, I know we retcon this as, you know, the Clippers were always the plan for Kawhi. I think Kawhi just simply wanted to just be in LA, and he saw an opportunity at first to re-sign with Toronto. He wasn't really interested in that, even despite winning a championship. But there was also another option for him to go to the Lakers. And with the Lakers, Kawhi would have probably either been the second or third option. It would have been either him or AD. I believe LeBron took a pay cut around that time too, so they had a little bit more cap space. The only thing, they would have probably had to sacrifice a lot of their bench, because in order to get a guy like Kawhi Leonard, you have to sacrifice a little bit of money. Kawhi wants to get paid. It makes sense, right? But even when you look at that, the Clippers weren't even the first option in that scenario either. And Kawhi Leonard made them trade for Paul George. And knowing the mentality that the Clippers have, I feel like with the Clippers, they have this mentality of like needing to always have a chip on their shoulder, because they're always going to be known as the little brother of LA. So they always have to make these big moves for these name brand role players or these star players, you know. Like the move that they made with Paul George, it was purely just to get Kawhi Leonard on the roster, right? They said, forget the future. We're not going to worry about any of our first round picks. And then for a while, it was looking like the trade was going to work out in their favor. In 2020, it looked like they were going to win a championship, and then they completely collapsed in the bubble. And then injuries started taking over, right? So you couple that with the bad trades and the mismanagement and the fact that they traded for two even more older stars in Russell Westbrook and James Harden. Mind you, they gave up 2 first-round picks for James Harden as well. Now the Clippers are in a situation where they have no draft capital. They're relying on a bunch of old injury-prone players to get them wins. And they traded away all of their young players as well. Like they traded away Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who, if they kept around, I don't know if he would have ended up becoming an MVP caliber player like he is now, but he would have still ended up being a solid young player for this team if he would have stayed in a Clipper uniform. And that's the constant theme with the Clippers. And that's the common theme with the Los Angeles Clippers. They were never, ever going to be the number one most desirable option for anybody. Why do you think during the Chris Paul years, the most impactful signing that they ever made was JJ Redick? And no disrespect to JJ Redick, he was a great player, but like they could have went after somebody who could have made a bigger difference, right? They could have went after a impactful small forward who can average maybe 15 to 17 points per game, who could play some defense. They could have gotten somebody like that, or even, you know, they could have traded for a Carmelo Anthony towards the end of his Knicks tenure, who could have made a difference for them. I remember when those trade rumors were floating around back then. And even going into the Kawhi era, some of their biggest acquisitions were made through trades, and they gave up most of their draft capital in order to get those guys, right? So for the Clippers organization to disrespect Chris Paul like this is completely asinine. And also, I don't ever want to hear people complain about loyalty in the NBA ever again, because this is Chris Paul we're talking about. This is a guy that put the Clippers on the map. If he can't even get a basic level of respect, even to be let go in a situation where he's in a buyout maybe and he can pick wherever he wants to go, or even them just having a conversation, because from what I heard with the reports, they didn't even contact Chris Paul in person. They didn't even have a meeting with him. They just told him over text, yeah, we're sending you home. Best of luck with your future endeavors. Like, that is such a cowardly way to distance yourself from a player, right? And the other thing too, I already know people are going to say, oh, the NBA is a business. It's a cutthroat business. I get that, right? But I don't understand why players are expected to have loyalty in situations where the organizations could care less about them, and they're not even willing to work out a compromise or just be charitable to the player that gave the organization so much. They're not even willing to do that. But the players, for some reason, are supposed to give of their bodies and their availability and put all this effort into trying to win ball games. And they don't even have the security to know if they are being let go in an honorable fashion, Like, this almost reminds me of the Dwayne Wade situation with Miami in 2015, I believe, when he led them to that deep postseason run in 2016 against Toronto. They were one game away from the Eastern Conference Finals, and Dwayne Wade was looking for an extension, and the Heat were not willing to give him the money that he wanted, right? Which is fair. I mean, maybe they wanted to go into a different direction. Maybe they wanted to go into a rebuilding situation. Who knows, right? But Dwayne Wade wanted to be paid relative to what he did for the organization, because at the end of the day, Dwayne Wade was still a good player around that time. He was still an all-star level player despite being a little bit older. But at the end of the day, Dwayne Wade was able to rectify that situation and come back to Miami to end his career. This is Chris Paul's last ever season in the NBA, and all the Clippers really had to do was just keep him around. He didn't have to play much. He didn't really have to do much. He just wanted to retire in a Clipper uniform, and the Clippers couldn't even do that right. If Chris Paul decides to sign with the Oklahoma City Thunder and just ride the bench and get a free ring out of this, while I may not like it because I'm not really a big fan of Chris Paul, I don't blame the guy, man. First of all, it's a team that he already has history with, and he's already helped somewhat develop into a powerhouse in the NBA. He's already had an impact on that team. Why wouldn't he go back there, And secondly, they could use him as like a third string point guard, because their third string point guard right now, Nikola Topic, is out due to his unfortunate cancer diagnosis. Hope he gets well soon. So the Clippers could use, or not the Clippers, OKC could use a third point guard, extra playmaker, extra ball handler next to guys like AJ Mitchell and Aaron Wiggins off the bench. Like, that could be useful to them. But as far as this whole situation, I mean, this just feeds further into the inferiority complex that the Clippers have built for themselves. And before, I really wanted the Clippers to do well, because I don't want a situation where OKC has another top 5 pick in the draft. But at this point, I don't care anymore, man. The Clippers deserve whatever happens to them. If the Clippers end up being the worst team in the Western Conference and OKC gets the number 1 pick, so be it, man. They put themselves in a situation. They made all those dumbass trades. They made all those dumbass signings. They put all their faith in Kawhi Leonard, who has routinely proven that he's not worth all this investment that they put into him. So it is what it is, man. And you can't even just treat your point guard, a veteran point guard who's like 40 years old, with a certain amount of decency as to just have him around in the season. You don't even have to play him. Like, he was getting DMPs already and he wasn't complaining. But you decide to just release him like this? Listen, man, Chris Paul, if you want to go get that ring, go ahead and get it, man. I don't think anybody would blame you at this point. But that'll be the end of this video. Let me know your thoughts on this whole CP3 situation down below in the comments. I'm not even a Chris Paul fan like that, but man, this is some BS if you really ask me. Like, I just hate when certain players get mistreated by the front offices, especially for teams that they did so much for. And the Clippers are really an ungrateful organization if they really think that this is the best course of action to go. But if you like videos like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. I'm trying to get to 1,000 by the end of the year. Subscription would be really appreciated. Like the video if you liked it, and I'm out. Peace.